Welcome to GPS for your life. By using your date, time, and town of birth, and systems like human design, gene keys, and astrology, Ashley Goner and Jeannie Winters will show you how to remember what you wanted to experience in this lifetime to finally find clarity, purpose, and alignment in your life. Join them now for the next episode.
Welcome back to GPS for Your Life. I'm your host, Jeannie Winters. Ashley is not going to be part of this series. This is going to be the series about breaking down the body graph. And I know a lot of you are aware of some of the things in human design body graph, but most people don't go through the details, and I find them extremely important. So you'll find if you have a 1-3 or a 1-4 in your profile, you'll find this stuff really interesting. Somebody else might not, but I wanted to break it down for you. So first we're going to start with the body graph itself, right? And so everybody knows you take your date, time, and town of birth, and you put it into one of the systems, whether it's genetic matrix or Jovian archive, excuse me, or neutrino design. You get your uh, human design chart. Okay. On one side, it's a summary, and on the other side, you'll see what we call your body graph. It's a visual representation of your human design. So there are a bunch of, it looks like a person in the middle, and there are a bunch of geographic shapes. Those shapes are called centers. Those centers are actually what we would consider different areas of your life. And most people don't know this, that each center correlates to different organs in your body. That is the numbers inside those shapes or inside the centers are called gates. Each gate is what I like to call, it's like a personality trait or an archetype. People call it different things. There are, it's like different lessons that you're here to learn. There are 64 of them, which do correlate to the 64 codons in your DNA, and also to the amino acids, which again, a lot of people don't discuss. And so it has a lot to do with your daily health as well. So Dr. Joe Dispenza explains we have genes, we have healthy gene expressions, and we have weak gene expressions. Every time we're supposed to be learning a lesson and we try to avoid it, we create weak gene expressions in that area. So that trait is like, for me, I have anemia. Excuse me, that's low iron. I never had a problem with it until I was in my 40s. And in my 40s, I started realizing that I was getting very tired and had all these things. So I went to the doctor and found out that I had, low iron. And it would happen so much that they wanted me to get blood transfusions. And I was like, well, I can't, go in for blood transfusion. That'll freak me out, get somebody else's sickness, right? So I found out that I believe it's people pleasing that is attached to the G center, which G center is all about your identity, right? And I have absolutely no definition, which is consistent energy in my G center, right? That's the one in a diamond in the middle. And so, because of that, every time I stop taking care of myself and take care of everybody else, and do what they want and go in, along life the way they want to, basically ignoring my own identity, um, I would start to get sick. So I tried it out and I said, okay, I'm going to stop doing that and see what happens. Well, I did. And I now only need a vitamin 2 to 3 times a week. I don't need any kind of special. They were going to put me in for infusions of iron and stuff. And so this stuff really, really works. I've had some other people do it with different issues that they were having. And I know that there's a book out there that has all this information as far as the medical stuff. I'm not going over that right now. I believe you can get that on um, at either Jovian Archive or Human Design America. Um, anyway, moving on, you have the head center, which is where the thoughts come in, your ideas and everything. You can either get the thoughts from other people, from the atmosphere, or from, the ether. You can, the next center is your ajna. It's where you process information, right? How you make sense of things, conceptualization. And then next would be your throat center, which is where you communicate and you manifest and things. Um, then down the next one, the triangle, is your G center. That's your identity. That is your love center. There's a lot to each center, but getting through it quickly. Then you have that small sideways triangle, which is your will center, your ego, or your heart center. And that is basically your ego. It is, we'll go into more detail about that. That is small, but it is very powerful, especially if it is undefined. Moving on, in the middle, you have your sacral. And your sacral is your life force energy. And below that is a box, which is your root center. Okay. That is your adrenaline, your drive in this world. Um, Next to, if you're looking at the chart, over to the right is your, it's also another triangle that's sideways. It is your solar plexus or your emotional center. And then all the way over to the other side is your splenic center. And that's where your um, immune system and your fear, your survival instincts are. So, all of that said, that gets a little tricky, and we'll get on with that later. But I want you to have just the makeup. On the sides, you'll see boxes. Each one of those boxes are called planetary placements. The boxes on the right, if you're looking at it, they're in black, and that's what we call your personality side. And the other side is red, and that is your design side. So the black side is also called your conscious side, and that is what you would see on your natal chart in astrology. It is from the moment that you're born, where all the planets were, and how they affect every part of your life, right? So remember, I said you have 64 gates inside the actual body graph. The only ones that are going to show up in the planetary placements are the ones that are colored in, the ones that are defined. So you'll have that number there, and then you'll have that same number somewhere within the body, okay? Now, whether that line that comes out of that gate on the body graph is red or black will show you which side of the planetary placements it's on. It could also be red and black, so it would be on both sides. You can have multiple gates, you can have just one gate. You can also have multiple gates with different lines. The first number in that planetary placement is your gate. Then there's a dot, and the next number is what we call a line. The line is how that personality trait shows up in your life. There are 6 different potentials, and I'll go over those too when I go more deeply into this. I'm giving you an overview right now so that the next few episodes or the next several episodes will go into 2 to 4 planetary placements each time, as well as other things that you will not learn from most other human design analysts, coaches, whatever they call teachers. Um, Sorry, I say a lot. The something I'm working on. There we go. The red side is your unconscious side, as well as calling your design. So approximately 3 months before you're born, many people believe it's when your soul enters your body, and that is when you have a whole new stamp, or I should say, in astrology, it's called your prenatal chart, right? But it is the things that you're unconscious of in this lifetime that you're here to learn as you go through life. The crazy thing is that I can see everybody else's red and they can see mine, but I don't see my own until I grow into it. So a lot of times parents will see their kids red side and they'll be like, oh, you're so gifted in blah, blah, blah. You should really, try out for this. And the child's like, what is wrong with you? I am not good at it. I'm not interested in it. And then as they get older, they're like, wow, I actually am good at it. It's because the parent can see that in them, but the kid can see things in the parent that the parent can't see either. So Anyway, moving on. The as I said, the black side, you know about yourself. These are things you know about yourself. So that's why a lot of times when people get a reading from a just a natal chart, they'll say a lot of that, is accurate to some things. I'm surprised you didn't say other things, right? Or, maybe I'm just overthinking it or something. It's not true. You're missing a whole other chart, right? And then there's a lot of detail that human design goes into that astrology just doesn't. So that is the, as we move on, I'm just going to get into the shapes that are in next to the head. Those are what we call variables. And I will not be going over that in the next 13 episodes, but I will go into it after. Variables are extremely important, but most people get them wrong. And the detail goes so deep that I'll explain one of mine. You have your gate, and then you have the trait, then you have how it shows up. That's the line. Under that, you have the color. You have, so there's six different options of colors. Then it goes deeper, six different options of tones. Then it goes even deeper with five different options of base. So when you go through each one of those, and that's like way further when you get, if you're still interested after all this stuff, you go, what I found out was I not only about the way I learn was different than a lot of people, but one of the things that was important, and I believe it showed up in either tone or bass, that I am very tactical. So I kept trying to use my cell phone and my computer to put information in. And what it taught me was that I'm more tactical. And so it went so deep as to say, you would do best with a book, writing in a book, or having sticky notes around because you need to feel how you're communicating. You wouldn't do very well with keeping things in a phone. And that's like ridiculously accurate. And that change, it was a game changer for keeping me organized with a lot of things. So instead of keeping a calendar on my phone, I will keep a calendar in an organizer, which makes it so much easier. Now I want to start with Ashley's unconscious sun and conscious sun. So I'm also going to want to do her unconscious and conscious earth. 70% of who we are is in our sun and earth, both conscious and unconscious side. The rest of the 30% is all the others. But one thing that people don't know or aren't as aware of is so the concept of nature versus nurture. Um, Nature is the things that you're born with. Okay. Nurture is comes from the conditioning of the environment around you, whether it's your family, your friends, your school, church, community, whatever. What happens is, so let's use Ashley's chart be an example. She has gate 6.3, so line 3, in her unconscious sun. So that's actually, most people would look at that and think that that's extremely challenging because gate 6 is all about conflict, or that's what it's called. I don't get caught up in the names because some of them don't really align very well. Now, every piece of energy in this world has three different expressions. Some people say two, but it's really three. So one is your aligned expression when you're living it the right way, right? If you're living in alignment, things are just going very well, very easy. There are two shadow expressions. One is either repressive, and the other one is reactive. So repressive is if I'm living out of alignment in conflict, or if Ashley is, then it would show up as her not fighting back, her, getting into conflict with people, but letting people walk all over her, right? And that could be one of the ways it shows up. So as the reactive side, she might take it out on everyone else instead of, holding things in. She's like, what's your problem? And, getting into fights with people, a lot of drama, a lot of emotional turbulence. So three different expressions, right? The difference here is, so now it's in her unconscious subconscious. This is something she wasn't born aware of. What that means is she's going to have situations in her life where she's going to face over and over again, of different scenarios where conflict, it happens, right? Emotional conflict. Things are not in agreement, right? The line three means she's going to learn this through trial and error. So, and she has it in detriment, which adds a whole other level. Now, most people would say, oh my gosh, that's a horrible thing to have as your unconscious son. It is challenging, but it could actually be less challenging than somebody with easier aspects there. It depends on your nurture. So, Ashley is not combative at all, if you know her, right? Ashley is extremely, she doesn't like conflict. She likes to be a peacemaker. She doesn't run from it. She just, um, she speaks her mind, but she speaks it like, diplomatically, I guess. She's very easygoing, very emotionally intelligent. And so, even though it's in detriment, whatever experiences she had as a child and in growing up, she learned how to get into the aligned frequency or expression. Now, if she grew up in a family who was not emotionally available or compassionate, or she didn't have people around her who, taught her all the different things, or, how to learn from the lessons and stuff like that, then she would be in a different situation. That very easily could be, somebody who is addicted to something. I mean, because that's a big challenge, right? But she actually came out the other end. So it really depends. The nature aspect is just half of it. The nurture aspect tells you how easy it's going to be to manage this, if it's going to be more difficult or not, how your surroundings are. So looking over at her conscious sun, she has 11.1, and 11 is about ideas. It's part of the channel of like the storyteller. So this means that her, one of her pieces of her core identity is that she learns throughout life how to manage conflict in a healthy way, or healthy conflict, because conflict doesn't necessarily have to be ugly. It's just a word that's been associated with being ugly. It's just disagreements, maybe, or, different views. And she learns from it, and then she shares it with people. She gets ideas. So the way that would show up maybe in um, in an aligned expression would be if you had given your opinion and she didn't know, what, she's never heard of that before. She wouldn't shut you down. She would say, "Oh, I've never heard of that before. Tell me more about it. I can't wait to learn." And that's totally her if you know her. So she's big about learning, big, big, big. Um, and then if it was in the repressive shadow, she would hold back her ideas. She would, not, she would just be like, yeah, okay, and just yes people to death and not really go deeper where she really desired to go deeper. She didn't want to push it herself on anybody. And then the reactive expression could be that she forces her ideas on other people. She would be combative when somebody would start to tell her something, and she would be like, no, my ideas are right. Yours are, you're not right. And there's no room for, us to work this out and, compromise. So she's actually living in alignment the majority of the time that I'm with her anyway. Her family may say something different. But now moving on to her unconscious earth, you thought conflict was bad. So she has crisis in her unconscious earth. So your unconscious earth well, your earth on both sides is your how you ground. So the sun is your identity, and the earth is how you ground that identity, right? And so both the 6 and the 36 come out of the emotional um, center. So they're both emotionally charged, and she learns through trial and error because they both have line threes. And so it could, like I said, it could show up in chaos, in crisis, and things happening out of nowhere, taking her by surprise and stuff. Um, but depending on how she was raised or how her environment was, she could have just experienced crisis, but was taught to stay calm, right? That's the aligned expression, is staying calm through crisis. Everybody else could be running around, and she immediately puts, things together and says, okay, this happened. What are we going to do about it? Can't do anything like that. We'll get over it. It'll be fine. Everything will work out. That's but she had to get to that through trial and error, right? Depending on her family and her surroundings as she grew up. If they were dramatic and chaotic, that would have been a hard lesson to learn. But if they weren't and they were a little easier going, and staying calm through crisis, she learned easier, so it wouldn't be as difficult. Um, so her conscious earth, oh, it's 12.1. Sorry, 12.1. So 12 is the gate of caution in the unconscious, I'm sorry, in the conscious earth. The person's stability comes from learning when to speak and when to remain silent, right? So um, line 1 is a foundational line. So it's all about learning, studying, going deep. And that would have been her ideas in the sun as well. But here in alignment, she would know when not to speak when she shouldn't speak, and when to speak up for herself when it's important. And again, the one that I know, Ashley, that I know now, she actually does that very well. Um, what I would say is that in the repressive shadow, she would not say anything. She would just let everything go, be passive, brush it under the rug. But again, remember, with that whole Joe Dispenza thing, Dr. Joe Dispenza, if you brush things under the rug, you are weakening your gene expressions. And if it goes so long, if it goes 10, 20 years, it goes on for that long until it shows up in the medical reports. You've done so much damage because you're not creating healthy gene expressions. Your body just does it instinctively if you avoid learning your lessons. You can always change it. That's why they say so many people are healing themselves from all sorts of things. You can, because you can create healthy gene expressions or you can create weak gene expressions. And if you keep avoiding learning lessons because it's too uncomfortable for you, then you're going to create weak gene expressions. And just because you don't get sick right away doesn't mean you're not going to get sick. Um, Anyway, not that I'm wishing that on anybody. I'm just saying that that's where that kind of stuff comes from. But in the reactive state, it would be overspeaking, right? Cutting people off when they are talking, or uh, trying to get their point across, regardless of what anybody else thinks, not taking other people's ideas or thoughts into consideration, not letting people speak their point of view, but putting them all together. She's here to help people and guide them into understanding how to manage conflict more peacefully. And she does it by sharing stories and speaking up when it's the right time to speak up, and not speaking up when it's not the right time to speak up. Because some people are ready for this type of information and some people aren't. And if they aren't, you don't need to get frustrated with that. You need to just say, okay, well, it's not something that they're ready to learn. It's like you're not going to teach calculus to a second grader, if they're not ready to understand it because they haven't had the building blocks in their life to get to, to the next step. It's pointless. They're not going to understand it, right? Um, the, and I don't mean that as an insult. That just means, you might not have had life experiences that you need to understand whatever it is she's trying to teach, right? Um, and the same thing, that's basically it in a nutshell, the whole thing together. But that is just the top four. I'm going to